Okay, dobro jutro everyone, and welcome to a nation guide on early age Rus. This is a special Patreon request, one of the last ones for this month. There's one more after this, and the third of the three Patreon requests for the months that were for nation analyses for Dominions 5. And today, as I said, I'm doing the early age nation of Rus. This is very simple. Early age Rus is Slavic nation and therefore is best nation. Unfortunately, because I have been indirectly paid for this video, I feel the need to actually do some analysis. So we're going to follow the usual structure here. We'll do the units, we'll do the mages, and then because it's early age Rus and is therefore inherently superior, we're going to do the entire second roster the nation has, which is all of the bloody summons you have from the various myths and legends, which going through I was trying to match against the various stories and legends that my Baka told me when I was growing up. After we've talked about the summons and the units, we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle early age Rus in the game. And finally, by popular request, I'm going to go through a couple of pretender design configurations for the nation first. But before we do all that, let's talk about the lore of the nation. Because early age Rus is closely linked in some ways both to real world geography and also legend and history. It's one of the nations that's more, you can more logically see the alignment. And what we're looking at here with early age Rus is we're looking at pre-Rurikid Eastern European and what we would now think of as Russian, Slavic, pagan civilization. So we're not going so far east into Russia or southeast that we're encountering like Tartars and the various steppe peoples. No, we're looking at the Slavic pagan population in what is still at this stage of Rus's development, a largely non-urbanized society. I say it's pre-Rurik because this is Russia before it gets the Scandinavian adventurer influence. The Scandinavians in the Dominions universe are mostly represented by the Vanir. So in the Dominions universe, the lands of Rus are close to the lands of the Vanir. So basically Russia and Eastern Europe as we would think about it. But in the early age, the Vanir haven't arrived and taken over. So you still have a primarily human, but also a second civilization, the Chudes, who are like a superhuman, sort of a... You can think of them in game terms as kind of like the Firbolg, a superior relative to humanity, but not quite the same. They're related, but they're just not the same. However, the two species live in comparative harmony. The defining social traits of this land of Rus is that you have two moieties, two different sorts of civilizations, tribal and settled. The tribal moiety is comprised of people who, they're hunter-gatherers, they're nomads, they live in forests, and that's represented by forest recruitments, and you'll see this travel through the nation's lineup. And in some ways, they're more closely aligned with the older parts of the culture and religion. For them, bears are sacred. Their meat raw, it says in the lore, and they're known for their berserker rage, their battle prowess, etc. The other moiety, as I said, they're settled. They live in houses. They cook. They have more what we would think of as more modern and diverse, less traditional magics, I suppose. And it is this second moiety that has a closer relationship with the awakening gods and the changing pantheon of Rus. The racial lineup is intermixed, and so are the two moieties. So the tradition is that if you are from one moiety, you won't marry within that moiety. You'll only marry one of the other. So if you are a city dweller, you will marry a hunter or a nomad, and if you're a hunter or a nomad, you will marry a city dweller. Obviously, this doesn't hold forever because we see the shift away from the moiety system by the time we get to the Middle Age, but at least in the early age, it's still in place. The humans are the more numerous of the species, but they're not dominant. The Chudes are clearly the more capable of the two species, but there's no evidence that they're politically dominant. And if you look at the lineup, most of the leaders, in fact, err on the side of being mixed, but you've got humans and Chudes both together. The most powerful units, however, are, as you would expect, Chudes. If there's no player intervention, what will happen by the middle-aged is that Vanir adventurers will come in and establish themselves as the elite of the nation. That is how you get Vanarus. But this is before that. And the Awakening God doesn't call to the Vanir, he calls to the Chudes and the humans of the Urushion lands. So, you have to see whether or not you can work with what you've got in order to protect the Awakening God. In terms of lore, we do know also, as well as being proximate to the Vanir, which makes sense considering we think that, Rus kind of sits in Russia or the Baltics, or that sort of part of what we would think of as Europe. The comment here that the bear warriors are respected and feared even by the warriors of Ulm does suggest contact between the two nations. And if we place Ulm where it appears to be, which is central Germany, and we place Rus in sort of Slavic Pagan Europe, so to the east, hypothetically anywhere from Poland east, I guess, that makes a lot of sense. So where we would think of them sitting in terms of their mythos also seems to attach fairly well with what nations they have contact with and interactions with in the lore. Talking about the special features of the nation then that also help us characterize further, first of all, it's a cold to preference nation. The land that they live in is, by description, a land of harsh winters and short summers, which suggests to, sort of the way a lot of people imagine parts of Russia to be in the lore, and that's represented by the cold to preference and also cold resistance on some of your units. The other thing that's interesting is that your forts are primitive, but your temples are really cheap. The primitive forts thing is supposed to represent, I suppose, the less settled nature of this nation. This is not Ermor. You're not building great imperial cities. It is not Ulm. It's not even Arcocephali. It's less settled than that, so you have primitive forts. However, those primitive forts aren't that bad. They're not great, but they're not that bad. They have in some respects, they have advantages as well as their disadvantages, which we can talk about once we get into the game. Let's talk now about the unit lineup, because this is a nation with a decent number of troop-enabled options, and then a lineup of commanders which should use a lot of magics that are familiar if you've just watched the Fomoriya guide, in that this is an air nation first, and then with supporting arms. Not an air death nation, unlike Fomoriya, but it is still an air nation, and then it has supporting magics, which is a pretty good set, as you'll come to see. Let's do the units first. The Urushion Hunter. So these are the tribal human version of the hunter. The key here is that you're paying 10 gold, 6 resources, 4 recruitment points. So cheap as chips for a guy with a short bow and a spear who is stealthy. The only problem you have here is undisciplined. Undisciplined means you don't have the option to set shooting targets for the short bow. But other than that, cold resistance, stealthy, mountain survival, forest survival, snow move. And you'll see snow move on quite a few of Rus's units. That's handy because you'll always be cold scales, and this means you might maintain more mobility in your lands than the other guys do. The relative of the Urushion Hunter, just to skip forward a little bit, is the Chude Hunter. Here you pay 25 gold, and you have what you would think of as a Chude stat line. So Chudes tend to be higher strength, higher skilled, higher hit point, and then more often have Berserker. So here you have 25 gold. So you're getting more, you're paying more than twice as much to go up to 17 hit points, so less than twice as many, but you've got attack 13, defense 12, your protection's good, your MR's good, your morale is good. Berserk 2 means you're actually prot 13 if you survive your first hit. Still undisciplined, you've got forest survival, mountain survival, snow move, cold resistant, and here you've got a javelin instead of a short bow and a 16 damage spear. Handy. On both of these units, and I'll flag where this is the case, you've got a lot of foreign recruitment stuff mixed in here. Urushion hunters are everywhere outside fort walls. Chude hunters are in the capital, but also in all forests. Urushion Warrior. Urushion Warrior, I don't like this guy as much. He's a stock standard infantryman, which I guess is okay. But in general, I don't like really low damage spear infantry, which is exactly what this is. 10 gold, 12 resources, 9 recruitment points for a cold resistant 5 snow move, 11 prot, attack 10, defense 12, spearman. Okay. There's nothing special here. If you need just a line holder, that's something he can do because he's not undisciplined. But he's not a foreign recruit unit, and he doesn't hit particularly hard, and he's not really inspired in any particular way. He's still probably better than his colleague who uses the axe because he has the ability to repel occasionally. But no, I'll take it back. The guy with the axe also hits hard. So against certain opponents, you might choose the slashing damage over the 13 Pierce. Just remember, Pierce will take 20% off the prot value, but the axe will add, the slashing damage will add extra damage once you get past prot. So against lightly armored things, the Urushion Warrior, more murdery than his colleague with the spear. Then we have their colleague, the Chude Warrior. So this is the settled Chude moiety. Here you're paying 20 gold. So twice as much. You're getting 1 line holder instead of 2. Your line holder is, as always, tougher. 17 hit points, better stats, hits harder, higher prot, higher MR, higher morale. They're just better in every way, but they are twice as expensive, which makes them not a clear pick. The Chude Berserker. Now we're getting into something a little interesting, but also something expensive. The Chude Berserker is an ambidex. Think of this as a relative of like the human Iron Here type of guys. 17 hit points, and then an attack 13 and an attack 12, 19 and 21 damage respectively, broadsword and axe. Because you're ambidextrous, this is not being nerfed. The Berserker 2 is notable also, because the protection's going to go up to 14, and the damage and the on those weapons is also likely to go up once you Berserk, which is kind of handy. The defense skill is not crap for an Axe Warrior, and that's what this is basically. A really good Axe Warrior, in that he's tough, he's well-rounded. The issue here is expense. The recruitment point cost is high. The resource cost isn't really. And a theme which emerges as we go through these troops is this is not a resource-intensive nation. You're going to run out of gold or rec points, usually gold, before you run out of resources, particularly if you're going to foreign recruit. Then you've got your capital-only sacred, the Chude Skin Shifter. So these guys, it says here, at the Pine of Skulls gather the Skin Shifters, Chude Hunters of exceptional skill, and they're given an uncooked bear heart by the Pakunus, which changes them in spirit, presumably when they consume it. And as a result, these guys are Skin Shifters. So what have you got? You've got 65 gold, which feels very oof. For 19 hit points, attack 14, defense 11, only 7 prot, MR 13, morale 14. So those are okay. Only 5 resources. You're going to run out of gold before you run out of resources. They have recuperation. A lot of Skin Shifter units do. Forest survival, mountain survival, snow move, cold resistant, coupled with 16 map move. Decent. You can get 2 provinces out of these guys in some terrains. And of course, sacred. What are these guys good for? Well, the first thing they're good for is they hit bloody hard. 26 damage is huge, and once they berserk, if they survive, they're likely to hit even harder and more. This is a unit which is very good at chopping through prot-based units early in the game. So people who would normally tank through with like a prot-based thug, he'll chop him down. Super heavily armored infantry, chop him down. This is the sort of unit you would roll out if you were somehow teleported to the Middle Age and you somehow needed to chop through like Almish commanders, or you were desperate and you wanted to get through an infantry line. He hits really hard. He's more survivable than he looks too, because when he dies, he transforms into a size 4, still sacred, bear with 2 attacks, which also berserks. Now, the bear is obviously not particularly skilled or not particularly protected, but it keeps the ability to be blessed. And because it's size 4 and the human skin shift is a size 2, as long as they're not all transformed, the size 2s can share a square with the size 4s and intermix. Some people love the Chudes skin shifter. Some people think you should build a bless and a nation around it. I'll talk about later on when I talk about summons what isn't in favor of that suggestion. I don't think it's completely stupid, because the same sort of things skin shifters might want would also be benefited from, like your summonable sacreds and whatnot, and also your mages, because you'll see most of your mages are sacred as well. But being a capital only sacred, I wouldn't consider only them. If I'm blessing them, I would want something that works on other units as well. And then you got a foreign recruit, the Bear Warrior. The Bear Warrior is, well, if I called the Chude Berserker a better Axe Warrior, that was a bit of a misnomer. This is the better Axe Warrior. This is the better version of the Ormish Axe Warrior. This is the thing that Orm apparently respects. 18 gold, 4 resources. And 4 resources is a good thing for a foreign rec, because you often won't have a huge number of resources, but they're coming from forests, remember, so you'll have at least some. So if you have gold, you can get a decent number of these chaps. They don't have the throwing axe, unlike the Ormish guys, but they got a whole bunch else going for them, although they do have the shitty defense of their Ormish colleagues. Undisciplined is a problem, but forest survival, mountain survival, stealthy, snow move, cold resistant 5, berserker +3, which means if they happen to survive the first hit, they're at least up to 10 protection from then on. This thing hits hard and often. 2 attack 11s, 6 attacks per square, especially if you get a wrap. That is enough to harass down and hit a lot of elites that would normally rely on their defense, particularly non-cavalry elites. And even cavalry elites are going to be suffering a little bit of a harassment problem if there are, 3 or 4 attacks per turn coming in against them. It's a lot to deal with, and any given hit is likely to be damaging and potentially lethal. 20 damage is likely to push through armor, and then it gets multiplied for being slashing. Not bad. I'm not completely in love with Bear Warriors in some respects, those being it is expensive. It's 18 gold for a unit that still only has 13 hit points and 7 prot. You lose them, they're high attrition. But they are perfectly capable of raiding. They're perfectly capable of murdering elites, and those are 2 good use cases for this unit. They are an acceptable infantry unit. They can be foreign recruited, so they place less emphasis on you getting stupid amounts of infrastructure up. So I am happy that they are in the national lineup. Don't go overboard or you'll always be broke, but if you happen to have lots of gold, this is a good way to fill the ranks with workable units. Okay, mages, let's go. And then we still have to get to summons, and then we have to talk strategy. There's a lot to do. So this one might be one of the longer ones. We'll see how I go. Scout. Most importantly, foreign recruit scout with a whole bunch of skills. Awesome. Foreign recruit scout, and a cheap one, a human one, means you have no excuse. You have spies everywhere. Not spies, scouts. You should know everything that is happening past the early stage of the game, because you can get scouts everywhere. So get them everywhere and find out what's going on. Intelligence wins multiplayer games, and if you're one of the people who play single player, I know a couple who watch me do play single player, even then, seeing AI forces coming is important. Rus Chieftain, generic 40 gold, 60 leadership chieftain, i.e. he's better than the independents, but he isn't foreign recruit, so you'd want to get the non-fort recruit one, I think, a lot of the time, unless you really want the benefits that come from 60 leadership. I value fort turns a lot. Urushion Priest. This is a 45 gold, 1 recruitment point national priest. Good to have, and because he's Urushion, he has cold resistant 3. Not much cold resistant, but cold resistant. Super cheap to upkeep. 10 leadership, so can lead parties of sacreds in the early game. Just got to be careful not to get the priest sniped. And now we get to some interesting stuff. So first of all, the Urushion Wizard. Urushion Wizard is only 125 gold, and he's a bit of a variable mage. But the key here is 125 gold, 13 research, because he's got adept researcher 2. He's got the typical Urushion cold resistant 3, and then he comes fire, nature, and then random. air, earth, astral nature. Let's quickly wind this up. N2, always useful, because N2s can make staves, not staves, thistle maces. N2 can be useful in combat. You need some N2s. Astral obviously makes these guys astral slaves, or if they're leaders, they can bring their paths in, but they're more likely to be your slave mages. A quarter of your Urushion wizards can do the job of being slaves in your communions. Earth 1 is more of a self-buff path, not amazing. Air, yeah, I'm not thrilled on the Air 1, Earth 1. They're both useful, particularly if the goal is to keep oneself alive, but you're going to need some guys researching, right? So I don't see why you wouldn't have the Air Earth runs researching. Everyone's researching, but you're rolling out these two for combat, not the Air Earth ones. Son of Heaven, capital only. We've got a couple of capital onlys coming up now. The Son of Heaven, the Daughter of the Sun, and the Perun. If you're getting Fomoriya vibes of being cap limited, like yes, but also no, because the mages aren't as vital. Son of Heaven, Holy 2. Holy 2 is always a bit awkward, but you know, it is what it is. Here you get Fire 1, Air 1, Nature 1, random Fire, Air, Astral, Nature. So, another thing that can connect to a communion, technically. Being able to hit Fire 2, it's probably better to get Fire in a communion, to be perfectly honest. Although Fire 2, Phoenix Power, Fire 3, Bang, Fire Elemental. Like, there are things to do here. Can be A2, but you've got a lot of A2 going for you anyway. What else can I say? For a mage, this is one thing I can say. For a mage, most people don't expect mages to be carrying 27 damage, 15 attack battle axes. Like, if you are forced to push these guys into service as, like, ultralight thugs, you can do it. They've got self-buff paths. I just imagine they'd need too much kit to make it worth it. Because usually what you're doing with light thugs is you're killing PD. That's what a light thug kills PD. And pretty much only PD. But your stealthy troops kill PD, and stealthy troops can be bought with gold, and gear costs gems. So I'd rather use troops, but hey, it's a pocket capability. Okay, researcher for the upkeep. Upkeep is going to be similar to that of the Urushion Wizard. His research is the same as the Urushion Wizard. Difference is the cap turn. The Daughter of the Sun. So here we're at Fire 2 base. We're no longer a Holy 2. We're down to Holy 1, but I really don't care. And we can go Fire 3 here naturally. Now we're starting to cook with gas a little bit. There's even a small chance to go Fire 4. I wish you could get Fire 4 more reliably, because then you can make the booster to go to Fire 5 and do basically everything under the sun. Still, Fire 2, and it's a way to get Fire 2 in the Communion. You can Phoenix Power, you can buff the fire paths of the Urushion wizards, because you'll remember your wizards, your slaves are going to be fire base. So if you want to get into the Flaming Arrows game, you can, which suddenly makes things like javelins and short bow arrows a little bit more attractive. Other than that, N2, we've talked about it. A1 is probably the least useful variation. However, it's useful for them to self-buff and protect themselves. I don't think you're overloading on Sons of Heaven or Daughters of the Sun. Both of them are kind of useful, but I don't think you're overloading on them. The Perun, however, you're probably never going to have enough of. You'll always wish you had more, because he's that combination of expensive and useful. Because, once again, we are a nation with an out-of-the-box A3. Heck, it's an A3 with a chance, a very, very, very small chance, to be an A4. But A3 with an astral path means it's basically A however high you like, as long as you're willing to pay some slaves to do it. And A3 is enough to do Storm. If Storm is there, there is A2s can do Storm Power, and you're in the Thunderstrike and Air Elemental game. It's the magic number for Air Nations. Do you have accessible A3s? If the answer is yes, then Conjuration 5 and the early evocation spells are serious options for you, because either you're going Storm, Thunderstrike, or you're going Conjure, Air Elementals. And the Perun gives you that A3. He's not brutal in his upkeep because he's sacred, so the 380 actually gets reduced down to a more reasonable 152 gold per year. He's got N2 built in, so you've got high N in your communions as well, like guaranteed when you get him. And then he's got some serious built-in resistances. Shock resistance 20 is big. Cold resistance 5 is decent. And then he's got all the survivals and 18 map moves, so he's mobile too. He's also a shape changer. He has a werebear form. The werebear form triggers when wounded and means that these guys are actually much more survival than the human HP chassis would indicate. It's even better. Remote damage spells like Flames from the Sky and things like that would normally take out human mages. One, they're not very likely to take out a guy with 19 hit points instead of 10, which makes this guy less vulnerable to that kind of bullshit. If you kill him, he just shape changes, and then the damage stops, the combat resolves, and he comes back. So shape changes don't tend to be killed by like single damage remote attacks. They can still be remote assassinated, but they're less vulnerable to the sort of things that mess up human HP communions later in the game. He's tough enough for the job. And like the other guys, if he does get into close combat, he can hit you hard. He's still an angry Slav with an axe, and he's going to axe you real bad. Then you got some foreign recruits, of which one is really bloody important. Urushion Chieftain, we talked about. The Chudes Chieftain has 80 leadership. So foreign recruit, you're paying a little bit more, but you can get a foreign recruit leader who gives you the 80 leadership, which means the +1 morale and the formations and all that good stuff. He's a little more survivable. Probably your best like ordinary leader if you need ordinary leaders, noting that your mages are variable in their leadership. The Perun doesn't have great leadership, but Sons of Heaven and Daughters of the Sun do. Then there's the Thunder Priest. This is the shit. This is the shit. This is the guy who makes the nation kind of work here. Because we talked about how we have a recruitable A3, right? We got a recruitable A3 in our capital. Well, A3s are great, but a capital only 4 rec point mage is not going to make me an area vacation nation. I need someone who the numbers to take advantage of that storm. Thunder Priest are those numbers. A2, N1, Sacred, so reduced upkeep, random paths, air, earth, astral, nature. Which means, if you're massing these guys, you're going to get a fair number of A3 Thunder Priests too, which is kind of handy. The astral ones also can pocket into communions if needed, either backing up your Prakuno or being masters themselves. You can do some big air communions with these guys, and at the same time, they're not awful in terms of survivability against remote. No, they're pretty bad because they got 2 prot. The advantage you have, actually, paid for with the disadvantage of them not being very good at reading books, is if you hover over them, it can be recruited in all forests. So we don't even need to put forts up to start recruiting one of these every 2 turns. We do need to put a temple and a lab up, but we're Rus. Our temples only cost 200. So the usual problem with foreign recruit sacred mages, whereby you don't want to lose the 400 gold temple every time someone raids, and if you set up like a lab and a temple, you may as well fort it. Well, with Rus, maybe you do lab and temple. Maybe you do that. And of course, you can recruit them in your stuff anyway. So, if it's a forest province, you can get Thunder Priests. These are the bulk of your combat strength. They're the bulk of your recruitable mage combat strength. They're not great research mages. They're worse than Urushion wizards in that respect. But you're getting a lot more combat power, so you still want to be stockpiling them. As A2, they're also Cloud Trapezers, which means that in the late game, once you started to build up more air gems, you can totally just drop 20 mages on people, and all those mages can be carrying gems, and you can be like, surprise to their throne, have 50 air elementals, and they die. Very, very entertaining. Love Air 2 mages, and the Thunder Priest is exactly that. Now, this is a decent lineup. It's not like the world-beating lineup that Femoria had, but it's a pretty respectable human Chude lineup. It's air magic with the ability to communion in. So we have astral, we have air, we have earth, we have fire, we have nature. We have access to all that good stuff. So we already know that this is a nation that has a great magical offensive option straight out. Air magic. Air magic is a huge offensive option, but you also have access to all of the protection buffs, the survivability buffs, the battlefield-wide wipes and spells that come from having some nature, some fire, some earth, some astral. It's great. You are in the Firestorm game, you are in the all the nature buffs game, so you can do you can ward off poison, or you can poison the battlefield if you find it's a way to mix in water, but you can at least protect yourself from poison. You can do mass regen, you can do Firestorm, you can do all the earth protection buffs. Like, you don't have great access in a lot of those areas, but you have the ability to connect. You have the ability to connect them into your communions. The one thing you might not be able to connect easily, I don't think you can easily connect Earth, because I don't think you get Earth on a Mage. Yeah, you don't get Earth on a Mage that is going to also have the Astral for access. Everything else that I mentioned, you've got wired in. So Earth may require a little bit of finesse, especially since you can't forge crystal gear. There it is. Anyway, this is only the first half of the roster, because it's Rus. And Rus, it has a deep connection with Slavic mythology, which means we've got a whole bunch of Slavic-themed summons to play. So, off to the mod inspector. But before we do summons, we've got to do heroes. So what I've done here is I put the non-worthy heroes on the top. So these are the ones you're always going to get if you're playing Dominions. If you're playing with worthy heroes, which I think most games are played with, but I try to separate them out, you'll get these ones on the bottom as well. So, first of all, proof, the Rus, best nation. You get Baba Yaga. My Barker told me stories about Baba Yaga. Anyway, in Dominions, Baba Yaga is an ancient hag of the woods, but in game turns she's important because she is a Death 3. So yes, this chassis is super mobile because it's 28 map move flying. So she rocketing around the place, plus she can cloud trapeze. She's Air 3, but importantly she's Air 3, Death 3. Death 3 is a workable amount of access. Not superlative, but a workable amount of access. Death 3 is practically Death 4, just straight off, because you make yourself a stick. She'll get you a bit of death income. You can get some decent death summons at D4. You can't break your way all the way up, but is 1 in power really going to break the bank if you really want to go into death later in the game? I don't think so. Having a D3 pop up, fantastic. Unfortunately, she's minimum turn arrival 20. That's what unfortunately nerfs her a little bit for me. It would be better if Baba Yaga could arrive on like turn 10 and like bring that death magic in early, so you could side search, build up your death income. But still, she's there. She's diversity, gives you death. Vaude, son of the bear. Okay, so Vaude turns into a bear because he is son of bear, so he turned into bear. You follow? Vaude's not particularly incredible. He's a shape-shifting Astral 2, Nature 3, Holy 2 Chieftain. Which is why he's got no turn limit on his arrival. So he can turn up fairly early. This is more oh, great, okay, this guy turned up. Thank you for the early Nature 3, I guess. Yeah, he's handy to have, but he's not superlative. He doesn't give you something really new, unlike Baba Yaga. And then over here, the Daughter of Thunder, Perkuna Tete. Born during devastating thunderstorm, shape changer, one of the more interesting shape changers in the game. So, first of all, default Chude form, A4, E1, N2, Holy 1, Sacred Recuperation, blah, blah, blah. So, Air 4, off the bat, fantastic. Air 4 means A4 actually means Air 5, which means you're going as high up air as you want to go. You want to make Queens of Elemental Air, she'll get you there. And doesn't have a turn arrival that is as late as Baba Yaga's, a bit early, it's 15. Now, her shape change is interesting. It's -1 air, +1 E, +1 N, and she turns into an immobile, 18 protection, 110 hit point tree, which is a plant. key. This is niche, I guess. Under certain circumstances, maybe the path boost matters, but I think this is more a mechanism to A, be fluffy, and B, keep her alive in extremis, as opposed to something that's mega useful. So of the ordinary heroes, it's Baba Yaga all the way. This hag with her D3, she's arriving to Wailing Winds and Wind of Death some people. She's arriving to get you some death summons. Like she's game. She can hang with some of the summons that like carry on this theme that we'll see in a minute. The worthy heroes. Olga, the Vengeful Widow first. Okay, so Olga, the Vengeful Widow. Her thing, if all heroes are said to have a thing, is 1, being a Holy 3, 2, arriving early in the game, turn 5, is the earliest she can arrive, not when she's guaranteed, but earliest she can arrive, and giving you Fire 4. Fire 4 means Flame Helmet means Fire 5, means you're as high up fire as you could possibly want to be. A little bit of extra guaranteed diversity there. But even better diversity comes here from Veles, the Shaman of many forms. So, Ancient Shaman, Far Off Lands, looks like a Jotun, is almost certainly a Jotun. Takes the form of a gigantic bearded man twice the size of a Chude. I'm pretty sure this guy's a Skratir. I'm pretty sure this guy is just a Skratir. Anyway, his thing is that he has multiple shape changes. He has his bear form and he has his snake form. Are any of these stealthy? Doesn't look like any of these are stealthy. Well, I was hoping that he could transform into something stealthy, but he cannot. His thing is that he gives you some blood. Just blood too, but just a little bit of blood. And with just a little bit of blood, you'll never get a blood economy going, but people who've played this game for a while understand the value of having just a small trickle of blood slave, just a couple of being able to get just a couple of blood things going on. And this is your slight amount of blood access. There we are. That's the hero lineup. Let's go talk summons. Okay, we're going to be here for a while. At Conjuration 4, Vodyanoi. So this is a water spirit. You get it as a water 2 ritual. The problem is you don't have water 2 in your ordinary lineup, so unless you've got some way to get access to this, you're not going to get many Vodyanoi. Now if you do, then what you've just gained is a whole bunch of water 3s that are, to be fair, reasonably cheap. The other thing I'll say is that the Vodyanoi is a remote summon with a range of 4 provinces. So I guess you can drop these guys in, but if you're dropping them in, they're not going to have water gems, which is the main reason that you'd want to have these. This is actually a decent underwater combat mage. It doesn't have a huge number of hit points, but it's a water 3, which means it's actually water 4 in the water, which is the only place it should ever reasonably be. If you want to get it out, give it some kit, like some Shambler skin, bring it on land. Awesome. And you can add water magic to your repertoire. But there are probably different ways that you might do this. Still, if you want to pick these guys up, you're going to need to have a way to get water magic already. There's a couple ways to do it, but it's not something your national lineup is going to do for you. The Bergina, Conjuration 6, Water 3, Earth 1, Nature 2, Water Breathing 20, or here we're paying 35 water gems and we need Water 3, E1. So again, a set of paths you're not normally going to run into. But it's a way to use water gems. What are you getting here? Another like water magic combatant, essentially. They can take a couple of companions underwater with them, thanks to the water breathing, not a huge number. Something you could clear a lake with, hypothetically. The problem is, I don't see how you get to the point where you still need to clear a lake, but you have the paths you needed to start getting these guys. Still, fluffy. Rusalka. Okay. Here we're at Water 1, Death 1, and you're thinking, okay, again with the water magic popping up. Rusalka can make Rusalka, but you need something else to make the first one. The Rusalka is a seducer, a Water 1 D1 seducer. That's not a fantastic seduction path, but it is a seduction path. You have a stronger summonable seducer option as Rus, however, it comes much later. If you have these paths early on, you can get Rusalka relatively cheaply, 16 water gems. Those Rusalka in turn can find you death gems if nothing else. We talked about Baba Yaga before. Baba Yaga can make Rusalka. She can't make much else. Well, she can make a lot of other things, and then water is pretty easy to boost. But Baba Yaga hypothetically could make your first Rusalka, but that's a minimum turn 20. Are they a way to search for death? Yes, they're seducers. Cool. Is seducing people with like zombie ladies from Slavic myth cool? Yes. But lacks the I suppose killer power that mages with better assassination paths have. Still, a mage assassin, completely workable. You can handcraft skeletons at an opponent, for example, and you'll probably win against most things. Where were we up to? Okay, that's the Rusalka. Let's talk about the Alchemist. Alchemist, okay. Here we have a super high mobility Holy 3. It comes at Conjuration 4, which is early, and it requires Astral 2. You'll remember you have a lot of Astral in your roster. Getting an S2 is not something that will be instant for you, but it's something you'll absolutely be able to do. So, Sacred, Holy 3, super high mobile. The only thing I wish is that it was Sacred. Other than that, it's really cool. Inspirational 2 makes it a functional leader of the 40 people that it leads, and it's cheap. Remember, most nations for Holy 3s have to go Bishop Fish, which is a later conjuration level. They're really bloody slow, and you can only summon them in water, which is difficult for nations that don't start in the water. You need to set up the water infrastructure, make them an item, get them on land, and walk them to a throne. Not so for Rus. Rus just makes Alkonost, and you've got mobile Holy 3s. Problem is, you have other ways to do that too, right? So if you go back to your recruitables, what was I going to say? Oh no, sorry. You only have your Holy 2. So you do need to summon this guy. That was almost an error. So there you are. That solves your lack of a Holy 3 problem. Awesome. The Cloud Velar. Now again, this is a later game summon. Cloud Velar requires A4, which you will definitely have. Source terrain, mountains, or you have to border a mountain. So it's a mountain spirit. This is a female spirit of the wild, and this thing is, well, it's expensive, but it's also kind of cool. Resist shock, resist cold, stealthy, healer. It is both a seducer and a very powerful mage. A3, S1, N2. So already a powerful air communion mage, but you've got a lot of powerful air communion mages anyway, so it's probably not doing a lot of combat duty. In a seduction, this thing is likely to be overkill. It's hard to do enough damage with one seduction/assassination per turn to justify a 40 air gem expenditure. However, if you are facing an opponent with tough targets who you want to seduce or assassinate, Cloud Velar will do it. Taking Air 3 into an assassination off a failed seduction means you just drop a full-sized air elemental on the dude. And he will suddenly really wish that he decided to go home with her instead of make a fight of it, because a size 6 air elemental in an assassination battle against unscripted defenders, it's going to mess most people up real bad. So Leshi, Cloud Velar, kind of cool. Leshi, also very cool. We'll talk about them now, because they're a little bit, don't let the unit card fool you. This, not the thing on the left, this thing is a Leshi. Conjuration 8, 60 nature gems, N6. So you are getting this thing if you took a regen bless, basically, or you're doing a whole lot of boosting. But realistically, you're probably getting this if you took like a regen bless or a nature god, and you're able to get from the N4 or N5 that you had at minimum, N6, N7 probably, and you're able to make a couple of these guys. Leshi in ordinary provinces are not at all good enough for what they are. They're little size 3, 24 hit points. They're pretty bad, actually. They crawl. They're just generally terrible. Because this is a forest guardian. And in a forest, Leshi is actually this. And this is more legit. 84 hit points, size 6, A2, W1, E2, N4, and it still has hands and whatnot, so you can boost it. So N4, regeneration 10%. This thing can handle, when properly geared and built, in a forest, so a lot of limitations there. This thing can handle armies in that context. He's got the Water 1, the key Water 1 path, which means foul vapors, which is not something people are immediately expecting from Rus. Bang, he's got it. He'll survive poison, he'll survive cold, he'll regenerate, he can self-earth buff, he can self-W buff, he can self-A buff, he can self-E buff, he can do big battlefield spells. In forests, Leshi are king. It's just outside of the forest, they kind of suck. And that means you've got to read your terrain as to whether or not Leshi are useful. Remember, this is a Conjuration 8 summon. This is in the elemental royalty sphere. So you've got to be sure that you've got enough forest that it's going to be worth its value. Now, it's not as immobile as you'd think because it's got A2, so it can cloud trap from forest to forest. But it's really only a forest combatant. That said, very cool. Gamma-Yuns. I'm not super sold on the Gamma-Yuns because the paths are too close to what you get from your recruitable mages. You need S3 to summon them. So already we're starting to get into a bit of an ask, unless we're starting to get a bit more asky territory here. What do you get? It's a 28 map move, Adept Researcher, but you're not going to pay 25 Astral Pearls for something that is going to sit there researching. For a high mobility A2, S2. Like, okay, but I don't think I've ever seen someone roll these out in a game because your recruitable mages have those sort of paths. The same problem sort of applies to the Mountain Velar, except for the fact that the Mountain Velar has some extra path in the form of the Nature 3 and is a seducer and has a bunch of valuable stuff that sort of adds to her value. Powerful female spirit of the wild. This requires an N4 to produce, so we're a little more realistic. N4 is a little more realistic for us to get to. Seducer, Sacred, A2, S1, so vulnerable to the jewels. N3, which is a decent mage path spread, and we're paying 40 nature gems. Now, I always compare things to Naiads. We're in the same sort of cost range to the Naiad, but whereas a Naiad is a 3-path, and homesick, this is at a higher conjuration level, but you're getting better paths on a better chassis, no homesickness. And as a result, I think, yeah, this is probably a good idea. It doesn't break you into anything you're not already in. It's just more of the same. It's more nature, more air, more astral. But, again, niche seducers. And having just a couple seducers can mean you might end up with some foreign enemy mages in your roster that you wouldn't otherwise have. And that's one way you might go fishing for a little bit of diversity. Also an interesting way to break up armies that rely on, say, communion setups. Chuck some seduction/assassination in beforehand. It's an expensive way to do it, but you get a cool mage for your trouble. Sirens. I'm not really down with the Siren, to be honest. Dream Seduction is just demonstrably worse than Seduction. That said, they are super stealthy, they are sacred, and they are cheap. So you could probably spam them and roll a lot of these morale v14 dream seduction sort of things. I haven't tested it. I don't want to say they're crap without having tested them more, but you know what? I'm not sure. This is one where I'm going to leave it open to the keeper because I don't have enough experience with dream seduction, but I'm pretty sure for dream seduction to work, you need to fail MR and morale, and as a result, doesn't really proc. It's like the Sirens luring them into the sea. It's not anywhere near as valuable, and you don't get the assassination battle because it's a dream. It's not an actual in-person physical seduction. So I'd rather get the real thing. Then there's one of the coolest units in the game. Look at that. Tell me, any nation with a unit that looks like this, could you not play it? How can you say no? This is the Bukovac. The Bukovac is a giant tentacle size 6 water being that lives in lakes, apparently, in the Rus. You summon it at Conjuration 5. It has a range of 4, so you just drop it on people. You drop Bukovac on them from, I don't know, if they fall from the sky and then suddenly they're in the lake. Bukovac has Fear 5, Protection 15, so he's going to stay alive for a while, and a Fear 5 aura. And he's a Trampler. So, tramples most things under the water. The things he can't kill, he scares away, and he's got enough prot and hit points that he's going to survive for a bit. Now, is he going to get murdered by full-size water elementals? Absolutely. Bukovac is going to get destroyed, but you only paid 5 water gems for him. People pay Call the Wild to get a couple of birds to drop on a province and make it neutral. If you want to make some underwater provinces flip, drop Bukovac on them. You get to keep the province. It's a form of gem raiding. He'll kill PD. He'll kill things that aren't ready for him. He won't kill anything underwater that can summon water elementals. And he comes at Conjuration 5. So heck, if you got Conjuration 5 before the other guy, he might not have full-sized water elementals. There's a couple of things in the Rus where you can harass water nations. You're not a water nation. You can't live underwater. You can harass them. And as far as I'm concerned, if a water nation is annoying you, then airdropping some tentacle monstrosities on them from 30,000 feet for 5 water gems is a pretty good deal, just to say, like, mate, you know what? I can make your life more difficult, and it's by dropping these things into your water. Then, what have we got? That's the Leshi's bear, which means Liko. Liko is an angry lady, basically. I don't like the Liko. You summon Liko because you want to drive up unrest in enemy provinces, but they cost 10 death gems. Death is already something you're not going to have a huge amount of, because your ability to site search for it is limited. If you've got limited death gems, are you really going to spend them to troll people with unrest? I don't see it. I would save up those death gems, get Baba Yaga, and then play the death game properly, albeit to a limited extent. I wouldn't spend them on Liko. Lady Midday, is this another one of our death summons? Yes, this is air death. Okay, so yet another assassin. This time not a seducer, just outright assassin. So, this is I believe, a remote assassination. I believe this is a remote assassination. So what are you paying? You're paying 10 air gems to remote summon. Oh, maybe it's not a remote assassin. Maybe it is just a remote summon stealthy commander. So what have we got? Because this is another one I've never summoned in a game nor seen in a game. What have we got? It's an ethereal assassin with fear. And the Plague Scythe is... Plague Scythe isn't bad. Extra effect on damage, disease. You know what? I'm here for this. Yes, your ability to summon them is limited, but there's a lot of things that this will kill. Being ethereal helps it. If you're and being a flyer, so because it means you can just drop on the enemy commander, you don't have to walk through whatever he summons at you. The Plague Scythe means one, it's really quite damaging. This is what, a 19 damage weapon, not bad. If you wound them, if you hit them and you wound them but you don't kill them, if they don't have a way to cure disease, you're still killing them. And there's a lot of things in this game that you might be able to at least get a wound on. Yeah, you know what? For 10 gems? For 10 gems, maybe. Hard trade-off, because you're always going to value your air gems as, is this worth more than me dropping 10 full-sized air elementals in a big battle? And the answer is usually going to be no. But I'm happy. The number of assassins you have in your roster for a nation that can't recruit assassins is pretty freaking impressive. You have two sorts of bears. Great bears and great bears. This is ordinary great bear. Ordinary great bear, you pay 8 nature gems and you get 10 plus, so it's scaling, of non-sacred great bear. But you're Rus, so you get better bear. They make the bears better in Rus. Here you're paying 8 nature gems again, and you only get 7, no scaling. It's not broken like Condor spell where you can scale it. 8 gems gets you 7 great bears. 44 hit points each, so 10% more hit points. They've got better stats. 2 more attack, 1 more defense. They've got way more magic resistance. And they're sacred. So, if you have a cool little bless, it'll affect the great bears as well. This makes you a nation that technically has summonable sacreds. And this is honestly where a lot of your nature gems are probably going to go. N1, Holy One, you've got that in spades. It's Conjuration 3, it comes early. This is a nice way to pump out extra sacreds to add to your roster early. And if you've got a bunch of resistances or survivability in your bless, these guys can actually survive a lot. Prod 8's not terrible. And they've got a lot of hit points. So if they're regenerating, they'll last a while. If they're larger, they'll last a while. If they've got resistances, they'll survive a lot of evocations and suck in a lot of evocations. So I'm not against the Great Bear. We're almost there, I promise. Smargle, Firebirds, Schmaze. Smargles, 1 for 1 at Conjuration 2. The whole point of this is, do you want to spend air gems to buy patrol power? If you are fighting a nation that is likely to try and infiltrate you with spies or assassins, Smargle can be very helpful. It's a lot of patrol strength. Normally, patrolling is not that important, and normally it's not worth you spending A, an air gem, and B, a mage turn for every single one you summon. I mean, patrol 10's good, but it's not going to break anything. I believe I've seen a Rus that was fighting against a Pangea, and as a result, Dryad infiltration was a major concern, and therefore the Smargle came out. But you get what you pay for, and it's a cheap early game weapon, so it has a narrow niche, but it's not like life changing. The Firebird I find almost impossible from a quantitative standpoint to stat out, because this Bringer of Fortune thing is really weird. So we've got a 2%. We spend 2 fire gems, F1, S1, so super easy to summon. We spend a mage turn and 2 fire gems, you get a Firebird. My understanding of this is you have a 2% chance, independent of the ordinary rolls of luck and the ordinary limits on the number of events. So there's normally a limit on how many events can be rolled per turn. Bringer of Fortune and Bringer of Misfortune bypass this. 2% chance that every Firebird will create a good event. That's very hard to cost. What kind of good event? Good events range from have a little bit of gold to here is some heroes and some magic access you wouldn't otherwise have. My thinking is if you're going to go Firebirds, you're going to have to go big Firebirds. You want to stack in your capital and have like a 50% chance to do a good event per turn. I can't advise it because I haven't calculated and I wouldn't know how to calculate how good that is. The one thing I will say is if the events it can trigger are still limited by the scales of the province, because different scales unlock different events, then the better your scales, the better this is. Because you've unlocked, there'll be more very good events in the good event possible list. Like some of the Magic 3 high luck events, like gems raining from the freaking sky, they're good. And if they're in the lineup, sure. If you're not a very high scales build, this is probably less important. Bringer of Fortune isn't there to counteract bad events and let you take misfortune. That's Fortune Teller. Bringer of Fortune is there to cause good events, which means it would take better advantage of good scales. Finally, you have the Jmei. I don't like summonable units, even when they're cool, and it is cool. It's a 45 hit point size 5 dragon thing. Why are you spending gems on a unit? You spend 5 fire gems and you get a AoE 1 fire breath. Cool. I'm going to be a traitor to the motherland here and say pass. There are better things for me to do with my time than summon these things. Are they cool? Yes. I'm not spending mage turns and fire gems on them. That's my personal judgment. That was like almost half an hour, I think, of summons. Let's go into the game and talk about how we execute. So that was just a few summons. What are we going to talk about in terms of the actual strategy for Rus here? And I'm going to say something I said about Femoria as well, which is that for a nation that clearly has a single path to like battle magic success, you've actually got a whole lot of choices, both in how you execute on the battlefield, but also what you take in terms of your bless. Let's talk about battlefield execution first. You have a number of different components that work together. You have the stealthy raiding capacity. That's always good. Being able to raid behind enemy lines is fantastic. And you're a better raider than, say, Femoria in some respects, in the troop respect, because you can recruit your stealthy parties using foreign recruit leaders and foreign recruit troops, which means you're not taking up your limited fort production capacity. Nor are you required to produce as many forts. It's handy. So any war that is defensive with Rus gives you the ability to shit troops out of your entire empire in emergency, and any war that is offensive should begin with you elfing someone. You should not just walk across their border. The little green men should pop up from behind every bush and axe people in the face, and you should own half their empire. You are like Early Age Ulm. You have Early Age Ulm's tools. It's just they're called bear warriors instead of axe warriors. So go do the same thing. Your line troops, your main armies, the troops are not spectacular. Skin shifters are okay, and you have summonable sacreds too, and you can do some cool things with them and their resistances. But for the most part, your troop lineup is uninspired. What's going to win this for you is your Mage Corps. And your Mage Corps is going to win it by doing a couple of things. There's the obvious path. You're an air nation, so it's going to be Conj 5 or Evo 5 for either full-sized air elementals with all the analysis I talked about in Femoria. This is the model where you trade off huge air gem expenditure in order to feel like a complete boss and destroy everything that comes at you. Basically, no matter what it is. Unless it's size 6 shock resistant units. Or you go Storm Thunderstrike and you also destroy most things that are coming for you, but a little bit less efficiently, but you spend far fewer gems doing it. So those are the two pathways to early air warfare dominance. However, because you're Rus, you also have a lot of extra options racked in. And those options are built around, you have nature and fire, and you have astral, all in decent quantities. The nature lends itself to being able to buff entire armies and rewards you for doing things like alt and ench, which isn't something you would normally go. However, if you're going down the conjuration pathway, you're going to pick up how. And this leads to the potential to slow down the battlefield. Air nations benefit if they are able to make themselves immune to lightning and then slow down the battlefield. Just like poison-resistant nations, if they can slow down the battlefield, can kill everyone with foul vapors, air nations can do the same with wrathful skies. If you pack some shock resistance into a bless or ward your units against shock, and they need to be reasonably shock resistant, noting that most of your mages, with the exception of the wizard, are sacred. So if you're using Perkunu and Thunder Priest to do this, and your bless covers them, and they self buff or both, you'll be fine. Wrathful Skies, with them being immune to it, is totally on the cards. Things like Howl then slow the battle down by distracting the enemy and letting that Wrathful Skies play out a little bit more. Your line holders aren't particularly good for that. But that's another example where if you had taken shock resistance, well, you can get a whole bunch of size 4 bears that occupy a whole crap ton of space. And if they're super shock resistant, they're just going to sit in front of the enemy and not die while the skies rain down and wolves come from the corner. So that's an example of what you can do. Fire means evocations. You can flaming evocations. So if people are super resistant to shock, and this is a popular thing. Shock resistance is a popular bless for a reason. If the enemy is shock resistant, well, are they also fire resistant? They might be if they've taken fire shock resistant, but they also may not be. You can mix fire in. If the enemy is shock resistant, but they're not size 6, doesn't matter. You can still trample them with air elementals. So you may want to adapt your research based on what you're seeing from your opponents come out in the early game. Beyond that, nature magic, big buffing your own units. You can't foul vapors yourself, but you've got nature there for things like mass regen, for Howl, for the benefits that generally come from nature magic, and you've got access to the items. You have the ability to light thug with your Chude mages, because they have some decent self-buff paths and they're sacred, which means if your bless is configured for it, you can do it. You're just going to be spending through the nose in order to equip them to do it, because they're not great thug chassis. This is not a Scrati. The Son of Heaven is not a Skratir. He's not one of the good recruitable thug chassis. Your combat solution, for the most part, though, is going to be Thunder Priests supported by Perkunu. And in Extremis, just Thunder Priests, because the Astrals and the Air Randoms working together can do some pretty impressive stuff. You're going to then branch into summons if you can. And the emphasis there is if you can. You may not have the gem income to do it. Most of your air gems are being vacuumed up into combat, and you may or may not have what you need in order to support summoning elsewhere, but you should go through that list and decide what's valuable to you. If you go down the sacred route, then getting a bunch of sacred bears is an option. Otherwise, do you want to diversify with assassins? Do you want some high mobility holy 3s? What is it that you really need? And don't forget the generic summons exist too. They can also give you a bit of a boost depending on what you've taken on your god. Let's think about scales alongside this, right? So you've got a nation that is going to want to win its battles by using air gems as its primary tool, but it's wanting as many foreign recruit mages as it can. Its troops are low resource but high gold expense. To me, this means you can go two ways. You can either look at the fact you don't need many resources and say, this justifies me not going big in the scales game. You're cold 2, so you can go to cold 3, and it's basically not even a negative. For once, that's basically a free pick, like an actual free pick, because during the summer you're on your base scale, so you make maximum amount of money, and during the rest of the year you're at -1. If you picked cold 2, then during the winter, so one season, you'd be at -1, and during the summer you'd be at -1, and thus -1. You'd be one off rather. So you're still missing out on half. You're missing out on half a year. Like at that point, you're like, seriously, one season of diminished income per year. I'm going to take the cold 3. Plus, your units are cold resistant. Naturally, you can make them even more cold resistant. I really wish you had water so you could do Grip of Winter, but you can't. But anyway, with Snow Move, make your land cold, make it unhospitable, go find Agartha and beat them up. If you can push your Dominion. And you should be able to push your Dominion because your temples only cost 200. So, scales. Sloth. You can go at least Sloth 1, I think, maybe more. most things are gravy. You can pick up 1 free scale by going to cold 3. You can pick up probably another 1, maybe even 2 by going sloth because you just don't need it. You spend that going growth, and you're still neutral scales, but you've bought yourself growth 3. That's a pretty good place to be. Pick a little luck, maybe. I don't think you particularly need order. You might. Magic is an interesting scale for these guys because Urushion wizards will get you by in Drain, but the Thunder Priests really want you to have magic if you're shitting them out because 11 research, this really benefits from having even magic 2. So I'd probably fit some magic scales in if I can. The philosophy with the bless is a couple of ways you can go. You can go in trying to bless for skin shifter expansion. You can bless for your mages, or you can try and do something that sort of does both. An example skin shifter bless, if you're going ham, might be something like regen, fire shock resist, which still lets you do all your Wrathful Sky stuff later. Your mages have fire shock resistance. Regen, and then you could maybe chuck Blood Bond on there if you're going completely ham. A Mage Bless would include things more like your recuperations, maybe even larger. Although your mages would also benefit from resistances, particularly shock resistance, maybe poison resistance, things that'll keep them alive. I do think if you can fit shock resistance into the bless, I'd almost certainly take it. The option to just nuke the battlefield while not killing your mages / also your sacred line holders, I mean, it's there, and you need quite a bit of shock resistance to be completely immune to things like missing thunder strikes. And you also want to be reliably immune to the damage of Wrathful Skies. So I would seriously consider that. Going anything from a weight titan to an imprisoned god is an option here. I think let's look at a few options. Give me a second. Okay, so here's a random guy who gives you a Titan who's cheap. Don't take this as gospel. This is more demonstrating the concept. So a Dormant Titan, because you can expand perfectly well without using your Sacreds as Rus. Like, you're able to expand without using them because you don't need particularly many resources to crap out a whole bunch of quite killy troops. This one uses Cold 3 and Sloth 2 to buy yourself Growth 3, 6 Dominion, and 1 Fortune. This could easily be that, or any combination thereof. You could go those sort of combinations, you play around with it. This gets you regeneration, fire shock resistance, minor shock resistance. That's 15 shock resist and swiftness. You could also grab precision. You can go super shock resistance. Who knows? You want to go awake. We can go for what? 5 Dominion. Yeah, we can go 5 Dominion and we can buy up. We could. No, we'll go 5 Dominion. You can go regen, just straight regen. You're awake with a Titan, straight out. Not a great Titan for expansion, but with regeneration, can probably do it, especially if you pick up the self buffs early or get a little bit of kit on it. Either way, this gives you 2 scales. So you could do that, or any combination thereof. Or you could even buy your sloth back up to 1 and still pick up one of these. Might be tempted by that, who knows. Imprisoning. No, I don't want the Omniscient Monolith, as powerful as that might be. You can build some more cool imprisoned stuff. I think I also built a imprisoned Mega Scales before. View Created Pretenders. So what was this? Oh no, I don't like this. This is shit because there's no shock resistance. But major, minor poison. This is basically a scales build for Rus. Yeah, this is the one I showed before, but with even more shock resistance. Way too much. This is too much shock resistance. This is 25 shock resist. You don't need that unless you're going to go invading Calum and you want to be able to tank Thunder Strikes. But even then, they're probably just going to break out the air elementals in that situation. I can also see a case for like a rainbow, just giving a nice bunch of mage stat boosts across the board. So make your mages resistant to bloody everything, make your sacreds resistant to everything and last a long time, while also being able to afford very good sacreds. If Rus was to take diversity, more death would be useful, as always, plus things that are going to unlock a couple of the paths that are underappreciated. Earth Astral Cross for crystal gear would be a nice option if you could pick it up. Little more blood maybe, but I think just the hero is probably all I would want. So yeah, I would consider going crystal. I would consider going death if you're in it for the diversity. But really, I think you're in it for the combination of a bless that is going to be either skin shifter and summon focused or mage focused, or something that tries to do both. The good thing about managing to fit survivability blesses in is that it also keeps your mages alive. Even regen, I don't think the sacreds on their own justify regen, nor do the bears, but your mages certainly appreciate having the regen, especially if they're turbo communioning. You have astral random thunder priests who, if they are regenerating, can really pile it on. Because if we look at early age Rus quickly, these guys, they've got nature 1 naturally. So what you can do, if you had a regen bless, for example, there are 2 hit points natural regen. Stick them in a communion, bless them all up, have the master of the communion do personal regen. That puts them all at 4 regen, which means your priests can support 4 casters without dying. And, you know, they're semi-replaceable anyway. 4 masters is not bad. That's the scenario where you might want to put just 2 slaves and 4 masters, and it's actually a turbo communion. Or 4 slaves and 4 masters works perfectly fine as well if you want to give a little more path boost. The options are there. So I wouldn't rule out regen. I like some shock resistance in the bless. If you fit astral in there, maybe pick up magic weapons. That'd be handy. There's no magic weapons in this roster. You can get around that by using magic, so you can drop thunder strikes on things on people. But, you know, if shock resistant Pangeans or elves come your way, you know, that you might be very, very sad. If things come at you that are using fog warriors and your magic weapons, you might be very, very sad. You just want as many tools in the chest as possible. So, yeah. That makes sense in a sense. So I'm thinking like you could rainbow, not rainbow probably because you wanted up earlier, but you could choose a chassis. If you could get Earth, Astral, and Nature all in there, you could get regen, fire, shock resistance, magic weapons would be a perfectly fine bless. This is a nation with options, right? It's not a nation where I'm going to sit down and say there is one way you can play this nation. You wanna go expand with nothing but skin shifters and rush people with bears and summon as many as you can and roll over them with the bear tide. Go for it. I think a more balanced approach built around your air magic mages, the Pekunu, taking advantage of your sacreds as blockers and HP and things that keep your mages alive while they do the killing is super handy. I think having the stealthy units as your surprise factor is really useful. I think having seducers shouldn't be forgotten. It's easy to forget, but you have a way to assassinate and seduce. One thing to say about Dream Seduction, by the way, is that because it can't trigger the physical fights, I don't believe, even though it's low probability, you could spam it on Titans on Thrones forever and eventually get one, maybe. Like, that's a possibility. They've got such high MR, though, that it probably almost never happen. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point because I quite like this nation. If I was to rate them, I would say they're average. The problem is that their best tricks don't work as well if the enemy has shock resistance. You can still drop air elementals on people. Like you can still crush them by spending air gems, but a lot of the cool tricks that you'd want to break out, like your Wrathful Skies and whatnot, don't work as well against shock resistant opponents. But you've got enough diversity in your magic that you have other options available to you. The roster's decent. You can do the Ormish elf tricks. Thunder Priests can cloud trapeze people and destroy PD, because you can totally kill PD with a full-size air elemental. That's a 4-gem raid, but, you know, it still works. You've got cap-only Sacred Mages that can Light Thug. The Perun is kind of cool, and at the end of the day, it's Rus, man. The final thing, which I know I didn't mention, was the forts. I'll go back in game quickly and I'll just show you the forts to close out. Okay, so Rus's first level of fort only takes 3 months to construct. 3. And costs 450 gold. So it's fast to build. It also is useless. It does like jack shit. Doesn't give you a commander point bonus. Does give you 50% rec points, but it's like admin 15, defense 100. It's crap. But at least you finish it quickly. And the advantage of finishing a fort quickly is that there's less time for that fort to be torn down before it completes. Because an upgraded fort being intercepted just pauses the upgrade. Don't lose the upgrade. The thing that shatters people's spirit in the early game is if you are building a fort on a critical province and a random event happens and you lose the fort. So being finished in 3 months is actually an advantage. Once your fort is finished, you upgrade it for another 300 gold. Which brings you which brings you to 750 gold and 5 months total, and you get the CP bonus. For saying these are shitty forts, I don't think they're that shitty. That's not that bad. Being done in 5 months, getting a CP, that's not bad. Now they are completely shit in terms of their defense. There's only 150 wall strength on these things. If you look at your capital, there's 150 wall strength on Rus's capital. It's kind of crap. They don't have very good admin values. They have terrible defensive values. But they're cheap and they go up quickly. And that's really all you need, because I just want to produce lots of mages. I don't need a huge resource bonus. And if people are knocking down my forts, well, I'm not going to hold up the walls anyway. It's just not, we have no specialized defender units. It's the early era. There's a lot of siege specialized nations around. You can't rely on your walls. You're going to be out there being stealthy. You're going to be out there being raiding. You're going to be airdropping people. And you're going to, if people do come for you, let them knock down the walls and then go out there and introduce them to your research core. And all of the research core are holding 1 air gem each. And there's one dude with a couple who's going to put up Storm. And when they raid the nerds are going to drop full-sized air elementals on their heads. That's basically how that works. So the shitty forts are not actually that shit. Overall, I have a soft spot for Rus. They are thematic. You've got the sense of 2 peoples and 2 societies cooperating together. Your magic is diverse, but also strong enough in its focused area that you've got some very clear, obvious points. Your flag is a bear, which instantly makes you very cool. You have summonable sacred HP bags, which I can't say no to. There's diversity. I'm happy. It's average. It's not a Fomorian superpower. It's not Vanheim. It's not Helheim. It's not Pangea. But you know what? It's pretty good. And by the standards of the era, it's at least functional. So I think it's fun, and I'm hoping that having seen this guide, all of you are encouraged to at least give Rus a go at some point. Anyway, closing out today, thank you very much again for the Patreons, all my patrons who have sponsored so much content recently. Thank you for those who sponsored this video in particular. I really do value the requests and guide and the content. I'm sure everyone watching the channel appreciates the higher pace I create them at, given that there's now a bunch of sponsored videos in my lineup as well. I'm not sure what's going to come out next. Next video is probably we're going to get a Phoenix Point video, and then there's one more patron request for the month. However, the topic on that one hasn't been announced yet. Final announcement for the night is there is a poll up for my patrons on my Patreon site. I'm considering doing a live stream at some point in the near future, and I'm just asking for recommendations on what title. So there is a poll going up. If you are a patron, get onto that form, vote, and tell me what you think I should play for my first attempt at streaming. For the 3 people that turn up, I want them to see me playing something that is at least vaguely interesting to the crowd. Anyway, all the best to everyone, and thanks again.